everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're taking a look at a very busy Saturday morning on the S-Line, along with a few other catches along the S-Line in the past couple months that I've just shot here and there. Recently, I think I've been doing a little bit too much research, and I realized that there have been 4 coal-powered power plants down here in Central Florida. You had one, obviously, in Orlando that's still receiving, and we'll see some of that in this video. You had Tampa with Big Bend, and there's a good chance they're never getting one again. Then you have FPL in Indiantown, and then McIntosh in Lakeland. And all 4 of those used to be served all the time. So there used to be coal trains. We're at North End Dade City right now. There used to be coal trains through here all the time. And now we pretty much only get the Orlando trains. So in this video, we're going to catch a CO41 coming south and whatever else comes that way. In the past couple weeks, Central Florida has been seeing some very foggy mornings, and driving out east on Saturday, February 8th, 2025, it would be no different. I'd beat the sunrise by a few minutes to Richland, where a high green would greet me on track 1 looking south. This indication would be for an approaching L743, with a short train today for Winston.
L74307 got it clear, Ellis, please. Second main, track 1, locomotive CSCC, 55 south.
On his way south from Brown Sand, he'll roll right through Waycross, dropping some rock there, and only getting a crew change in Baldwin. So by the time he'd make it down to me here at the Vitus double track, he'd be only 22 cars long, making the trek from Georgia in just under 24 hours.
Yeah, thanks, L74307's got it clear, Richland, locomotive CSCC, 865, Richland, track 1.
With the fog still very thick, I started to pack my things to move north on the line until our next train. But turning around, a restricting signal would light up Richland for another southbound, soon upgrading to a yellow approach as 743 cleared Vitus. In another few seconds, the signal would now display an approach limited, a common signal here for trains on their way to Tampa via the Yeoman sub. South a couple miles, and a check of the signals at Vitus would confirm my suspicion of a Tampa-bound train, as a limited clear aspect illuminates the number 1 rail. This tells a crew to proceed at limited speed and then continue at max authorized speed once clear. Our train would get this aspect as he diverges onto the Yeoman side here, taking a banked curve and turning towards Zephyr Hills, my next stop. Around the corner and 4 miles to the south of Vitus is the signal at Zephyr Hills. Named Zephyr Hills Holdout by the railroad, this installation is a dispatcher-controlled signal, albeit a single-head model. It's at milepost S808 and milepost ARF 840.7. From here at Zephyr Hills to Vitus, the seaboard trackage actually turns onto the old ACL's main line out of Tampa, stemming out of the present-day Navy Y and connecting to the main line at Vitus. A similar amalgamation of SEL trackage as Owensboro, Zephyr Hills Junction is now an easy curve that trains like X441 can bank at track speed, screaming south with solid automobiles for Tampa. Profiled as X441 out of Tampa, this cut of Tampa Autoracks would depart Baldwin just before 4 a.m., making it to me at 0718, a very quick trip for the crew today. Reminiscent of an Autorack unit train like the old Q237, X441 would be all Autoracks for Drew Park in North Tampa, and the potential start of unit rack trains down here in Central Florida again. There's some rumors going around about it, and I bet here soon I'll be covering some new trains in the future videos. With X441 flying into the fog, I'd drive back north towards Vitus as that CO41 entered the vicinity from the north. This is the train that I had originally come out for in the first place, and even with the fog, I decided to catch him on the US 98 bridge at Richland. I really am not sure how many more years coal will run on the S-Line, but shots like this loaded train in the Vitus double track will only become more and more valuable as time goes on. CO41 is coal loads for Orlando Utilities Stanton Energy Center, about 15 track miles east of Orlando, coming from Evansville Sugar Camp Mine in Indiana. From the A line to the power plant is all dark territory, so an EC1 for the 15-mile ALK line must be given by the dispatcher to loaded and empty shipments arriving at the plant and departing respectively. You can't hear it from the camera audio, but CO41 would be getting his EC1 now as he passed Vitus, with his two nice head-end motors leading the way. I wouldn't hear much else from CO41 as he also cruised into the mist, but at the end of his conversation with the JA dispatcher, it would clue me in on my next target, yet another southbound train who'd be following CO41's path all the way to Orlando. It's just after 0800 now, and the sun is finally starting to dry up all the fog that has settled in around here for the past few hours. Following the tracks north from Richland on the old Lakeland Highway, I'd pull in at the farm crossing between there and Ellerslie. A single boxcar would be sitting quietly on track 2 here, occupying the secondary main for the entire 2.3-mile stretch between Richland and Ellerslie. Apparently dropped by the prior night's M442 for Waycross, this lonely boxcar developed a hot axle, which would ping the defect detector at Vitus, known as Melrose. And similar to that 442 we chased around here last year, last night's 442 would have to make a set out. With handbrakes fully tied down, this defective car isn't going anywhere soon, likely scheduled to be worked on in the coming week and picked up by the daily L753 local out of Wildwood. Coming into Dade City, construction on the new roundabout that joins US 98 and the old Lakeland Highway is nearing completion. This project, along with the apparent double laning of US 98 through town, has caused headaches for rail fans and drivers alike, as slow merges and detours have plagued the once through route for the past several months. When completed, the roundabout will have straight connection routes on all 3 sides that will commence the secondary lane and now this 2-laned highway. North of town and now out of the way of the morning congestion, I'm at the north end of Dade City siding with yet another high green. That train that would be to follow the CO41 would be coming over the radio near Lakuchi, identifying as M457, morning freight for Orlando, coming out of a 4 a.m. departure from Baldwin. The signal cantilever here at the north end of Dade City siding is the first of its kind on the S-Line, as up until the CSX days, this area only hosted independent ground signals, with your dwarf signal guarding the siding and an occasional dull arm on the main installment. This construction at Dade City is called a cantilever, different from a signal bridge as it's only supported on one side. A signal bridge would have yet another post on the other side of the tracks, creating a span over the obstacle, in our case the railroad, now busy holding fast trains like M457, today led by a very sharp SD70 Mac, fresh out of the shops and rebuilt and better than ever.
45707 local CSX 4737 looking good by Dade City DD with a clear to Dade City. 737 clear, north end Dade City, south of Main, out.
As many of you know already, 457 is traffic for Orlando's Taft Yard, today with a sizable cut of Autoracks latched on in Baldwin. I'm not sure if Orlando's numbers are enough to warrant their own unit rack train, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the case that rack trains do start up again, Orlando will be a healthy part of the Tampa and Palm Center trains. I'd leave 457 from Dade as he barreled south towards Vitus, and I moseyed north towards Lakuchi. Lakuchi is an old seaboard town ever since its incorporation in 1888, and is now seeing second life with the arrival of new on-site commerce. Located along the old Calamine grain elevator spur, construction is well underway on the new Southeast Culvert facility here off Bowers Road. Built on the old Cummer Brothers sawmill property, the new industry will likely bring a much-needed economic push for this community, receiving plastic pellet hoppers once completed and open for business. I'm not sure about the expected capacity of this new facility, but it will be utilizing the old grain elevator spur and runaround tracks, an operation I'll be keeping an eye on for sure. Next stop for me would be Wildwood and some breakfast, but hearing a train trip the defect detector at Oxford, I'd play it safe and pull into Coleman. From the Taylor Avenue road crossing, the southbound signals are very visible and would oddly be showing all red indications, even though an approaching train would just be minutes away. Reparking off of Commercial Street, where the light was much better, I'd fly the drone to check out the northbound signals. It would make sense if something were lit over there, as then a meet would be set up here at Coleman. But much to my confusion, there'd be reds looking north too. In a couple minutes, the headlights of M441 would appear, and he'd be just as confused as me, calling the dispatcher to ask why they'd be getting the stop at Coleman. I wouldn't realize it now, but apparently the dispatcher on CSX's JA desk couldn't make up his mind this morning on where to meet this train in northbound M452. But after a quick conversation with 441's crew, a signal to depart Coleman would soon appear, as 441 told the dispatcher that they could make it way further south in Coleman before meeting the northbound. So into Bushnell I'd go, where the morning light doesn't get much better for southbounds, to watch as 441 barreled south. With the northbound 452 passing Dade City now, a meet would be set at St. Catherine, a much more realistic place instead of making 441 wait a solid 45 minutes at Coleman. M441 is mixed freight for Tampa, and the second 441 symbol of the morning. Today he'd be massive, with one locomotive up front and one in the middle as a DPU. Since the earlier X441 took the racks to Tampa, M441 wouldn't have any, yet he'd still be about 10,000 feet in length. With 441 already slowing through town in order to make it to the St. Catherine double track at about the same time 452 would, I'd follow the train south on 301, easily catching up to the head end at Rodell, where Reds would greet 441 again. I guess there'd be some type of blockage or issue on track 1 between Rodell and Ridge Manor, which is the south end of this double track, meaning the dispatcher would have to hold 441 in the 2-mile section between here and St. Catherine. That would be a tight fit, as 441 clears the north end just feet away from me and the crossovers. Rounding the curve on track 2 would be that 452, another massive train, today experiencing some issues with their end of train device, or EOT for short. The plan here was for 441's conductor to help them out with it, saving 452 a long wait and a long walk for their conductor. Passing just after 11 a.m. this day, M452 was nightly freight out of Miami, today getting a crew out of Lakeland just moments after the Miami crew would get off. It takes a while for this train to reach Lakeland from Miami, as they work Palm Center, Okeechobee, and once in a while Sebring on the way north, usually a breakfast train in Lakeland after a midnight departure from Hialeah. Palm Center would be quite the long stop this night, and it would show, as almost 100 racks would make up the tail end of 452, all empties destined for Baldwin. 441's conductor would guide 452 to a stop next to his train, as the two crews would plan a quick operation here before going their separate ways. Evidently, 452's EOT had disconnected from the lead motor on their way north, an essential radio connection that will prohibit a train's max speed without it. A couple buttons and a quick reset on the EOT would be enough to reconnect with 452's motors, switching to a different and I guess stronger radio frequency. During all of this, the switches at Rodell would line for a crossover, with a limited clear illuminating the signal here for 441 to cross back to track 2. He'd do just that after 452 would give them confirmation that the EOT was successfully reconnected. 2 blasts of the horn, and 441 is once again off for Tampa. It would take a while for 441 to get back up to speed, which would give me plenty of time to leap ahead of the train to Gold Road and the Dade City defect detector. This is a nice shot for winter southbounds in the morning, with its ABS signal now lit for 441, who'd come into frame just a moment later.
FX detector, milepost 825.9. No defects. Repeat, no defects. Total axles 720. Detector out.
This would be my last shot of the morning, but a couple months prior I'd be around in the area scoping out forgotten rail lines around town before returning to the busy main line. It's November 9th, 2024, and on my way to the S line today, I'd stop in at San Antonio, about 7 miles from Dade City, south and west of town. Once hosting the old Orange Belt Railway's line to St. Pete, San Antonio hasn't seen any rail action in decades, but the ACL's old depot still remains, along with a caboose painted in SCL orange. With tracks pulled up in 1978 by the SCL, we're on that same line to the Gulf that crosses the Brooksville sub at Drexel, and actually today makes the very bottom of the current Clearwater subdivision into downtown St. Petersburg. Restored by volunteers in 1993, the old depot in San Antonio would be completed in the late 40s and has been fairly well kept ever since. About 6 miles to the east and we're now in Dade City, scoping out the old Trilby depot at the Pioneer Museum. I'd briefly stop to grab a few pictures of the old ACL construction, but with a farmer's market and event happening within the museum, I'd quickly turn the car around, hearing a train somewhere out there on the S line. By the time we'd make it around the corner to the south end of Lakuchi siding, our train wouldn't be far away, calling as L729 and coming out of a noontime departure from Winston. It would be a straight shot from here to Baldwin for him with no work en route. 729 would be fairly big today, with about 80 cars behind the head end. You'd think that would make it a bit easier to chase this guy up the main line, but catching up to the train close to Bushnell, we wouldn't get ahead until north of town, and even then, we'd get about 10 seconds as 729 rapidly approaches. Later in the day, we'd mosey south to Central on the Yeoman sub. Many of you know this spot for the spur to the old Plant City Mosaic plant back in the woods a couple miles away. But today, an approaching southbound and an interesting construction site would catch our attention. Approaching from the north would be southbound mixed freight M441, with plenty of merchandise for Tampa and running very late today. Crew delays in Baldwin would set back 441's departure to lunchtime, passing us here at Central at a much slower pace than usual. At the time this video was shot, Hurricane Milton had made landfall on Florida's west coast just weeks before, and repairs on the railroad from the storm would still be wrapping up. A washout here at Central would cause a slow order for a while through the area, as construction on new roadbed and ballasting has been completed. For about the next month after the hurricane, train schedules would be all over the place, with construction and maintenance curfews getting the priority in order to prepare for the approaching peak season. M453 was a morning train down here just weeks ago, but now has been affected by all the same grievances as the others, making it to our last spot of the day in Dade City just before 5 p.m. With a nice Y&2 AC 44 liter and a long string of Autoracks behind the freight block, 453 would barrel down the hill just 28 miles from the end of this cruise day at Lakeland. Another Saturday and another evening, 453 would find us in Bellevue, just south of the Santos siding north of Wildwood. .453 would make it down the S line in the last light of day, still affected by the hurricane's push schedule now in mid-November. Now this was shot in November, and temperatures around Central Florida were just cool enough to go out with flannel or a long shirt. But jumping over to some footage shot just a couple weeks ago in January, we'd be staring at this approach limited signal at Vitus Junction in 28-degree air. It's January 25th, 2025, and with quite the cold front covering Central Florida this week, we'd plan a Saturday to head out and enjoy the weather. However, at 6 in the morning and before sunrise, it comes at a cost, specifically our fingers. We'd be waiting for train M457 coming south down the S line, lined onto track 2 at Ellerslie to get out of the way of a northbound out of Tampa. It would be a late M442, departing this morning just after 6:30. The dispatcher and Jax would plan for the two trains to meet here at Vitus, with the 457 appearing first, curiously led by a Tier 4 Gevo with only the headlight to guide their path.
CSX detector, milepost 836.5, track main 2.
M457 is the old 455, freight for Orlando and CSX's Taft Yard up there, taking the S-Line south, now an early morning train out of Baldwin, and a brunch time special on the Sunrail corridor. Today's train would be nothing out of the ordinary, plenty of freight for Orlando's numerous customers and Autoracks with brand new automobiles. On this cold January morning, the sunrise would start around 7:15 as another train called signals in the distance.
CSX dispatcher Jax Lex 441, over. They're going to bring you to Vitus Junction for now. I've got an M442 set at Zephyr Hills I'm trying to talk to on the radio, and I can't get a hold of them. But when you get to Vitus, we'll take you south as soon as they clear, over.
Entering track 2 at Ellerslie would be another southbound, now calling the signals at Dade City just after 7:30, and about the same time that M442 out of Tampa would round the curve.
M44225, CSXT, locomotive 756, northbound, main and one track limited clear, Vitus Junction, northbound out. X441, 5350, approach station, number 2 track up.
Today's 442 would be nice, not only in the fact that it's running down here in any sort of daylight, but also for its 4-engine Lasha, made up of 2 CSX motors and a couple of Union Pacific GEs. The decision was made to send these engines back north today, before their ethanol train was fully unloaded, so they'd hitch a ride on 442, passing us here at Vitus a good 4 hours later than it usually does. With freight from anywhere between Bradenton and Brooksville, 442 would be a pretty lengthy train today, with Autoracks from Drew Park making up the tail end.
442-756, got any approach race, number 1 northbound out.
Come in, Ray. Go ahead, Martin. Come through Dade City. I only think one kumquat pedestrian. Other than that, it's pretty clear.
All right. Appreciate that.
Won't let you know.
Meeting 442 up here would be X441, another extra shipment of Autoracks and some freight for Tampa, and another very early southbound out of Baldwin.
All right, 442, that's a good as well. I'll take some home.
All right, do the same. Okay, fine. 44.
He'd soon have a limited clear signal for himself, as the dispatcher would line him towards Zephyr Hills, Plant City, Valrico, and Tampa.
Yeah, taxi 5350 southbound. 2-1, limited clear, Vitus Junction. 441, 25.
X441 would be a pretty short one today, and with 442 taking their sweet time getting up to speed, we'd be able to utilize the empty roads to jump ahead of him by Owensboro. Frost all over the grass and foliage here is a testament to the freezing temps, almost looking like snow on the fields around here. The light would be good at Lacucci, so that's where we'd go, 442 following our tracks just feet behind.
.25 locomotive 756 northbound, clear north end, Lacucci, northbound out.
Pacing through St. Catherine and into Bushnell, we take a minute to film the block of Tropicana cars on this train, rolling north in the beautiful morning like today. It's not often that you can see these cars around in the morning on this stretch of the S-Line, especially at this time, but I hope it's something that becomes more and more common. We jump ahead one more time to Lake Panisofsky, where the crew would finally open up their 2 lead motors, now at track speed, with nothing but greens lined for them through Wildwood. After 442, the S-Line would return to its morning peace and quiet, so we'd take the scenic way back to Zephyr Hills and towards Lakeland on US 98. It'd be about 11:30 now, and coming into town from the north, we'd stop in at Jimbo's Barbecue for some early lunch. At the corner of US 92 and Fortner Avenue, Jimbo's seats plenty and has window service, serving up some of the best barbecue around, quickly and with reasonable prices. I got their pulled pork platter with green beans and mac and cheese, and I'm happy to say Jimbo's will definitely be a more frequent Lakeland stop for me. After driving around town for a bit, we'd head up the Vitus sub to check on the construction of the I-4 overpass, where not a single piece of equipment would be on and not a worker in sight. Since the last time I was here, there's a new concrete bridge support on the south side with a lot more dirt dug out of the north side embankment, likely receiving the same bridge support as the south side. We'd be here for a while, and departing Lakeland in that time would be M604, calling 10th Street just moments later and coming into view.
Alright, you got the M60425 on duty at Winston at 1300. You got Guthrie Brown with voltage number 13166. I got 2 locomotives in the lead on head-end power with a 3462 and a 3451. For fuel, I got 4,230 on the leader, 4,250 on the rear. PCC's up, TO's up, 25 loads, 127 empties, 152 car total, 7,517 tons. 8,969 feet, and we're no key train, no restrictions, no work en route. Fixed to pick conductor up here at Wabash and be ready to head north.
Alright, I got you. I just yelled at Vic. He's lighting you up now there. Leave when you're ready. Have a good trip.
604 has become an S-Line staple these days, always departing Winston between 2 and 4 p.m., usually between Amtrak 91 and 92's time slots, in the case that they're on time. Today, they wouldn't be, as back into town we'd go, with greens lit for Amtrak 91, a solid 3 hours past their normal time here. The new ballast on track 1 would make for a very cool shot, as 91 kicks up the dust on his way to Tampa, obviously trying to make up for a bit of lost time. After 91, we'd head west into Plant City, where Amtrak 92 would be right on 91's markers, running right on time today, with another Charger leading the Phase 7 scheme P42 trailing second. It's been a while since I've been to Plant City, and tonight it would treat Dakota and I well, as 91 now comes out of Tampa, seen at sundown, passing the Railroad Museum and Park. There'd be 2 freights to follow 91, but 92 would have to get out of Tampa first, so we'd relocate just west of town where we'd meet a friendly neighborhood cat and enjoy 92 racing north at twilight. Just 10 minutes after 92 would come Tampa's intermodal train, hauling north and wide open as I-044 tonight. It looks like business may be up for Tropicana because both manifest and intermodal trains will have solid cuts of Trops, 12 on tonight's IO44. After 44, we'd grab some snacks before heading back to the tracks, where a green signal would light up the A-line once again as L778 departs Tampa for Winston. It's been ages since I've seen this train around here, much less heading north towards Winston, tonight with a nice consist of rock and miscellaneous freight led by 3 GE wide cabs. Kinda crazy to think that a 25-mile local run gets 3 times the power than this area's priority intermodal train. With 778's clearance, our parade of trains would end with one more green, now looking south on the S-line. Coming from the north would be M441, running as an evening train this day with 3 locomotives in total. We've seen a lot of these 441s in this video, so it's fitting that this is the way it ends. I appreciate all of you for staying till the end of this one, and I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe learned a thing or two about our home state rails. But until we meet again somewhere out there trackside, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.